The sensor array screamed its warning into the empty shelter. Taeyang Kim looked up from his workbench, grease still covering his hands from repairing the water filtration system. The sound meant only one thing. A plasma storm was coming, and it was coming fast. He moved quickly through the small metal rooms he had called home for 3 years. Every surface showed signs of repair and modification. Wires ran along the walls in patterns that made sense only to him. Equipment from a dozen different alien manufacturers sat side by side, somehow working together through his engineering skills. This shelter had been abandoned when he found it, broken and useless. Now it kept him alive on this dead planet. Gyro 7 was a mining world that nobody wanted anymore. The minerals had run out decades ago and the companies had left. A few automated stations still operated, but no living beings stayed here by choice. The plasma storms made sure of that. They came without warning, turning the sky into a sea of purple fire that could melt steel and boil stone. Anything caught outside died in seconds. Taeyang sealed the first airlock door and checked his monitors. The storm looked worse than usual. The readings showed energy levels that made his stomach tight with worry. He had survived dozens of these storms, but each one brought the possibility that his shelter would finally fail. He pushed the thought away and focused on the tasks that kept him breathing. He was reaching for the second airlock control when something slammed against the outer door. The impact made the whole structure shake. Taeyang froze. Nothing should be outside. Nothing could survive out there with the storm this close. His hand moved to the old plasma cutter he kept near the entrance. It was not much of a weapon, but it was all he had. The outer door exploded inward. Emergency foam sprayed automatically to seal the breach, but not before a figure crashed through, moving fast. The figure hit the floor hard and rolled, ending up in a defensive crouch. Taeyang raised the plasma cutter, his heart pounding. Then he saw what had entered his shelter, and his blood went cold. She was Velthrian. He recognized the species immediately from the scaled skin that covered her body in patterns of deep green and gold. She wore combat armor that was scorched and damaged. Blood, darker than human blood, seeped from a wound on her shoulder. Her yellow eyes, reptilian and sharp, locked onto him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then her eyes widened. Her whole body went rigid with shock. Her mouth opened, showing the sharp teeth of a predator species, but no sound came out. She stared at him like he was a ghost, like he was something that should not exist. Taeyang understood why. Humans were supposed to be extinct. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. Earth had been destroyed 300 years ago, and every human had died with it. Except that was a lie, and Taeyang was the proof. The Velthrian woman raised her weapon, a military-grade energy rifle that could punch through his shelter walls. Her hands shook. Fear and confusion showed clearly on her alien features. Taeyang slowly lowered the plasma cutter and raised his empty hands. He had dreamed of meeting another living being for 3 years. He had never imagined it would be like this. Outside, the storm reached the shelter. The building groaned under the assault. Purple light flashed through the small windows, bright enough to hurt the eyes. The temperature inside began to rise despite the cooling systems running at full power. They could both feel the raw energy pressing against the walls, testing every seal, searching for weakness. Taeyang pointed at the window, then at the door. He spoke slowly, using the common galactic trade language that most species understood. His voice was rough from years of silence. He said that the storm would kill them both if she shot him. The shelter needed both of them working together to survive. She could kill him after the storm passed if she wanted, but right now they needed each other. The woman looked at the window, then back at him. Her weapon did not lower, but her finger moved away from the trigger. She said something in her own language, harsh and full of sounds that human throats could not make. Then she switched to trade language. Her voice was tight with pain and disbelief. She asked what he was. She already knew, but she needed to hear him say it. Taeyang told her the truth. He said he was human. He said his name. He watched her process this information, saw the conflict in her eyes. Everything she had been taught said that humans were dangerous. They were the species that had angered ancient powers and brought destruction upon themselves. They were extinct and good riddance to them. But the human standing in front of her looked tired and alone, holding nothing but a tool, offering help instead of violence. The shelter shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from a damaged panel. Smoke began to fill the air. Taeyang moved toward the panel, slowly, keeping his hands visible. He said they were running out of time. The storm was getting stronger. If he did not fix the damage, the heat would overwhelm the cooling systems and cook them both. The woman made a decision. She lowered her weapon slightly and nodded. She gave her name Mirai. She said nothing else, but her meaning was clear. They would work together to survive. Everything else could wait. Taeyang felt relief flood through him. He turned to the damaged panel and began pulling it apart, his hands moving with the confidence of long practice. Mirai watched him work for a moment, then moved to secure the broken outer door. She worked efficiently despite her injury, using emergency sealant from her combat pack. The two of them fell into an unspoken rhythm, each handling their tasks without discussion. The storm raged outside, trying to break in, trying to kill them. They fought back with wire and sealant and determination. An hour passed. The worst of the storm moved overhead, battering the shelter with everything it had. Taeyang rerouted power, compensated for failing systems, and kept the temperature from rising into deadly ranges. Mirai reinforced weak points in the structure and monitored the external sensors. They did not speak except to share critical information. There was no time for questions or explanations. Finally, the immediate danger passed. The storm would continue for hours, maybe days, but the shelter would hold. Taeyang checked the last readout and allowed himself to breathe. He turned to find Mirai leaning against the wall, her weapon now holstered. Her shoulder was still bleeding. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was fading, and pain was taking its place. Taeyang gestured to the wound and then to his medical supplies. He said he could help if she let him. Mirai looked at him for a long time. Her training screamed warnings. Humans were not to be trusted. But this human had just saved her life. He had kept his word when he could have let the storm do his work for him. Slowly she nodded. As Taeyang cleaned and sealed her wound with careful hands, Mirai studied him closely. He was smaller than she expected. Human propaganda from the old days had made them seem like giants, like monsters. This man looked ordinary, even fragile. His brown eyes showed exhaustion and loneliness more than anything threatening. His hands were gentle as he worked, professional and impersonal. When he finished, Mirai spoke. She asked the question that burned in her mind. She asked why a human was alive when everyone knew humans were extinct. She asked what he was doing on this abandoned planet alone. Taeyang sat down heavily, suddenly looking very tired. He said it was a long story. Outside, the storm continued to rage, trapping them together. Mirai said they had time, so Taeyang began to tell her. He told her about the day Earth went silent. He told her about being stranded. He told her about 3 years of survival and solitude. And as he spoke, Mirai listened, and the foundation of everything she believed began to crack. Taeyang spoke through the night while the storm pounded against the shelter walls. His voice was quiet, measured, holding years of grief that he had kept locked inside. Mirai sat across from him, her weapon within reach but no longer pointed at him. She listened, and her world slowly came apart. He told her he had been a civilian engineer working on a deep space mining station when it happened. The station was far from Earth, weeks of travel even at faster than light speeds. He had been fixing an ore processor when the emergency broadcasts began. Every human facility, every ship, every colony received the same message. Return to Earth immediately. It was not a request. It was an evacuation order. Taeyang and thousands of others had rushed back. The ships moved as fast as they could, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. Nobody knew what was happening. The broadcasts gave no explanation, only coordinates and deadlines. Fear spread through the human population like wildfire. Some said it was war. Others thought it was a natural disaster. A few whispered about something worse. When Taeyang's ship reached the inner systems, they found nothing. Earth was there, intact and whole, but silent. The orbital stations were abandoned. The defense platforms were dark. Every ship in the system floated dead in space. There were no bodies, no signs of battle, no debris. It looked like every human being had simply vanished in the same instant. They searched for weeks. Other ships arrived, all filled with confused and frightened people who had been too far away to make the deadline. Together they searched every facility, every colony, every hidden station. They found nothing. No humans, no messages, no clues. Just empty rooms and silent machines. It was like humanity had been erased from existence. Then the other species arrived. The Veltrian Empire, the Kronar Federation, the Thessian Collective. Their fleets came in force, weapons ready. They said humans had attacked the architects. the ancient machine intelligence that maintained the wormhole gate network. They said humanity had brought this on themselves. They said Earth was now quarantined, and any human found would be detained for the safety of the galaxy. The stranded humans scattered. Some tried to hide among alien populations. Others fled to the far reaches of space. Taeyang had ended up here on Kiro 7 when his ship suffered engine damage. He had landed to make repairs and found Velthrian patrol ships already searching the area. He hid in this abandoned shelter and waited for them to leave. They never did. They established a monitoring station in orbit and locked down the whole system, so Taeyang stayed. He made the shelter work. He survived on salvage and stubbornness. 3 years passed. The Velthrian station remained. He remained. Eventually, he stopped hoping for rescue and focused only on living one more day. Until tonight, when a wounded alien crashed through his door and looked at him like he was a monster. When Taeyang finished his story, silence filled the shelter. Outside, the storm had weakened to a steady roar. Inside, Mirai sat very still, processing everything she had heard. Finally, she spoke. She told Taeyang what the galaxy believed, what she had been taught since childhood. She said humans were dangerous. They advanced too quickly, discovered technologies they did not understand and used them without caution. They had found something in the ruins of an ancient civilization, something connected to the architects. Against all warnings, they had activated it. The architects responded with violence. They destroyed Earth and every human colony in a single coordinated strike. The message was clear. Some lines should never be crossed. The Galactic Council declared humanity extinct and placed all former human space under quarantine. It was a tragedy, but also a warning to other species. This was what happened when young races reached too far too fast. Mirai had believed this story completely. Everyone believed it. The evidence was undeniable. Earth was empty. Humans were gone. The case was closed. Taeyang listened to her words and felt a cold anger growing inside him. He asked her if it made sense. If the architects had destroyed humanity, where were the debris fields? Where were the bodies? Earth was still there, unharmed. The orbital stations were intact. Nothing had been destroyed. Everything had just been abandoned. Did that sound like an attack to her? Mirai had no answer. She had never thought about it that way. The official story was the official story. Nobody questioned it. But now, sitting in the shelter with a living human, the question seemed obvious. Why had all humans disappeared at exactly the same time across hundreds of light years? How was that possible? The fastest ships could not coordinate something like that, but the wormhole gates could. Before either of them could speak further, a small light began blinking on Taeyang's control panel. He moved to check it, his body suddenly tense. Mirai recognized the alertness of a man who had lived too long in danger. She stood as well, her hand moving to her weapon. She asked what was wrong. Taeyang said something had activated inside the shelter. He had not touched anything. The signal was coming from the storage room where he kept salvaged equipment. They moved together through the narrow corridors, both of them ready for trouble. When they entered the storage room, they found the source of the signal. An old data core was glowing with active power. Taeyang said it had been dead when he found it. He had tried for months to restore it, but eventually gave up. Now it was suddenly working. A holographic interface flickered into existence above the core. Text appeared in human script, then translated itself into galactic standard. A voice spoke, synthesized and artificial. It identified itself as Jiwon, an artificial intelligence fragment from the human transport ship Distant Hope. The fragment said it had been dormant for years, damaged and incomplete. Mirai's ship signature had triggered an emergency protocol. The fragment said it recognized Velthrian military encryption. It asked if hostile forces were present. Taeyang told the AI to calm down. He said the situation was complicated but not immediately hostile. He asked Jiwon what emergency protocol it was talking about. The AI hesitated, its voice uncertain. It said its memory was damaged. It had fragments of information, pieces of a larger picture, but nothing complete. However, it could confirm one thing. Humanity was not destroyed by the architects. That was propaganda. Both Taeyang and Mirai froze. The AI continued, its words coming faster as it accessed deeper memory banks. It said humanity had evacuated through the wormhole gates. The evacuation was planned, coordinated, and almost completely successful. Almost. Some humans did not make it to the gates in time. The gates were one way and had to be destroyed from the other side to prevent pursuit. Those who were stranded were left behind, abandoned but not forgotten. Taeyang felt hope and rage fighting inside him. He asked where humanity went. Why did they evacuate? What were they running from? Jiwon said that information was in the corrupted sections of its memory. It could not access those files, but it could tell them that the evacuation was humanity's choice. They were not attacked. They chose to leave. Mirai spoke up, her voice sharp. She asked why the Galactic Council would lie about something so massive. Jiwon turned its attention to her. The AI said the Council had its reasons. Humanity had been developing technology that threatened the existing power structure. Faster wormhole transit, advanced artificial intelligence, weapons that could challenge even the oldest species. The Council could not allow humanity to continue. So when humans disappeared, the Council created a story that made them the villains. Problem solved. The shelter fell silent again. Outside, the storm finally began to break. The purple glow in the windows faded to normal darkness. Dawn would come in a few hours. Mirai would have to make a decision. Her pursuit ships would resume their search for her. They would find this shelter eventually. She could stay and be captured, or she could leave and take her chances in the wasteland. Either option meant exposure to Veltrian forces. Either option meant they would find Taeyang, unless she helped him escape. Mirai looked at the human engineer, this man who should not exist. She thought about everything her government had told her, all the lies she had believed. She thought about the corruption she had uncovered, the reason she was running in the first place. The Velthrian Empire was not the noble force for peace she had been taught it was. If they would lie about humanity's extinction, what else had they lied about? She made her choice. She told Taeyang that her scout ship was damaged but repairable. If he could fix it, they could escape together. She knew places where they could hide, contacts who owed her favors. It would be dangerous, but staying here was certain death once the patrols found them. Taeyang looked at her for a long moment, searching her alien face for any sign of deception. He found only determination. He said they would need to work fast. Mirai smiled, showing her sharp teeth. She said fast was something she did well. Dawn came to Kiros 7 with a sky the color of rust. The plasma storm had passed, leaving the landscape even more broken than before. Melted rock formations stood like twisted sculptures across the barren plain. Taeyang and Mirai worked quickly on her damaged scout ship, knowing they had hours at best before the Velthrian patrols resumed their search. The ship was a mess. The hull showed scorching from atmospheric entry at dangerous speeds. One of the engine manifolds had cracked completely. The power core was stable but running at only 60% capacity. Mirai had done well to land at all. Most pilots would have died in the attempt. Taeyang examined the damage with professional efficiency, his mind already working through possible solutions. He told Mirai he could fix it. The words were simple, but they carried weight. He could fix it. This was what humans did. They looked at broken things and made them work. They took pieces that did not belong together and forced them into cooperation. It was adaptation taken to its extreme, and it was what had allowed humanity to spread across the stars faster than any species before them. The galaxy had feared that ability. Perhaps they had been right to fear it. Mirai watched him work, still processing everything she had learned. This human moved with calm confidence, his hands never hesitating even when working with technology from a species he had never met before. He understood the principles that made it work. The details were just details. She realized that this was what made humans dangerous. Not violence, not aggression, but this terrifying adaptability. They could learn anything, fix anything, become anything they needed to be. They worked through the morning. Taeyang pulled parts from his shelter, components he had salvaged over 3 years of solitude. He modified Velthrian technology to work with alien power systems. He rerouted conduits and rewired control interfaces. The ship would never be pretty, but it would fly. That was enough. Jiwon, the AI fragment now stored in a portable data core, provided assistance. The AI's voice came from a small speaker Taeyang had attached to his belt. It offered calculations and technical specifications, its fractured memory still containing vast amounts of useful information. Mirai found the AI disturbing. Artificial intelligence was heavily restricted in Velthrian space. True AI was illegal. Yet here was one speaking freely, joking with Tai Yang, showing something that felt like personality. Halfway through their work, the orbital station came back online. Mirai's equipment detected the power surge immediately. She cursed in her native language. Tai Yang asked what was wrong. She said the monitoring station had finished its maintenance cycle. It would begin active scanning within minutes. If they were going to leave, it had to be now. The ship was not ready. Tai Yang said it did not matter. They were out of time. They threw the remaining tools into the ship and sealed the hatches. Mirai took the pilot seat. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. Tai Yang strapped himself into the co-pilot position, watching readouts he barely understood. The engines whined to life, their sound uneven and rough. Jiwon announced that power levels were fluctuating. Mirai said she knew. She said they were flying anyway. The ship lifted off, kicking up clouds of red dust. It wobbled in the air, fighting against damaged stabilizers. Mirai compensated with small adjustments, keeping them airborne through skill and determination. They climbed toward the upper atmosphere. The orbital station detected them immediately. Warnings flooded their communication systems. Orders to land. Threats of destruction if they failed to comply. Mirai ignored the orders. She pushed the engines harder, racing toward orbit before the station could launch interceptors. Tai Yang watched the tactical display. 3 ships were launching, moving to cut off their escape. Military corvettes, fast and deadly. The scout ship could not outrun them. Mirai knew this. She was not trying to outrun them. She was trying to outthink them. She dove toward the planet's ring system, a thin belt of ice and rock that circled Kiro 7 at high orbit. The maneuver was insane. The ship was damaged. The rings were full of debris moving at killing speeds. But the corvettes were bigger, less maneuverable. They would have to slow down or risk collision. Mirai did not slow down. She flew into the rings like they were empty space, dodging obstacles through reflexes that seemed impossible. Taeyang held on as the ship twisted and turned. Ice chunks the size of buildings flashed past their windows. Twice, collision alarms screamed warnings. Twice, Mirai avoided disaster by margins measured in meters. Behind them, the corvettes struggled to follow. One broke off, unable to match her reckless pace. The other 2 persisted, firing weapons that turned ice into vapor but missed their target. Then Taeyang saw their chance. A large asteroid, big enough to provide cover, drifting through the rings on a slow orbit. He told Mirai to get behind it. She saw what he saw and grinned. The ship shot forward, engines screaming protest. They passed behind the asteroid just as one corvette fired a heavy plasma cannon. The shot hit the asteroid instead, breaking it into thousands of fragments. The resulting debris field filled the space between them and their pursuers. Mirai used the confusion to change course. She killed their engines completely, letting momentum carry them silently through the debris. The corvettes lost their lock, sensors blinded by all the interference. By the time they cleared the debris field, the scout ship was gone, drifting among the ice like just another piece of rock. Mirai waited, breath held, while the Velthrian ships searched. After 10 minutes, the corvettes gave up and returned to the orbital station. Mirai waited another 10 minutes before restarting the engines. She plotted a course away from Kiro 7, away from Velthrian space, toward the lawless zones where authority held no power. Taeyang felt the tension drain from his body. They had escaped. Against all probability, they had escaped, but their victory was short-lived. Jiwon spoke up, its voice concerned. The AI said it had intercepted a military broadcast. Captain Dabin, the commander pursuing Mirai, had seen Taeyang during the brief firefight at the shelter. She had transmitted an image. The image was already spreading through Velthrian networks. A human. A living human. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's extinction had been a lie. Mirai understood the implications immediately. Taeyang would become the most wanted being in the galaxy. Every government would want him captured. Every military would be searching. Scientists would want to study him. Politicians would want to use him. And most dangerous of all, those who had lied about humanity's extinction would want him dead before he could reveal the truth. Taeyang asked where they could go. Mirai thought for a moment. She said she knew a place, a way station in the asteroid belt between systems. Smugglers, pirates, and refugees used it as a neutral meeting ground. No governments operated there. No laws except the basic rules of survival. They could hide there while they figured out their next move. It was not safe, but nowhere would be safe now. They flew through empty space, the scout ship's engines straining with every hour. The repairs Taiyang had made held together, but barely. They would need proper maintenance soon. Mirai said the way station had facilities. She said she had contacts there who could help, or who could betray them. It was impossible to know. Trust was a rare currency in the places where the desperate gathered. 3 days passed in flight. They took turns sleeping, always keeping one person awake to monitor systems. They talked little, both processing the enormity of their situation. Taiyang thought about the other humans who might be stranded like him, scattered across the galaxy, hiding and alone. If he could find even one of them, he would not be the last anymore. The thought gave him strength. Mirai thought about her old life, the one she had lost when she discovered her commanders were corrupt. She had thought she was done running. She had thought finding this abandoned planet would be the end. Instead, it had been a beginning. She had found a human of all things. She had learned that everything she believed was built on lies. And somehow, impossibly, she had chosen to help him. She wondered if she was brave or just insane. On the 4th day, they arrived at the way station. It was a massive structure built into a hollowed-out asteroid. Ships of every design clustered around it like insects around a light. The station made no attempt to hide its presence. It did not need to. Everyone knew it existed. Everyone knew what happened there. And everyone agreed to leave it alone because sometimes even enemies needed a place to meet without weapons drawn. Mirai contacted the station. She used old codes, passwords from a different life. The response came quickly. They were granted docking permission. As they maneuvered toward the docking bay, Taiyang saw dozens of alien species moving through the station's corridors. Traitors, criminals, refugees. They all looked desperate in their own ways. He wondered how they would react to seeing a human. He was about to find out. The ship settled into its docking cradle. The hatches opened, and Taiyang stepped out into a place where his existence would change everything. News of a living human spread through the station like electricity. Within minutes, every being there knew. Some stared in fear, some in fascination, all in shock. The galaxy had believed humans were extinct for 300 years. Now one stood before them, alive and breathing. The impossible had become real, and nothing would ever be the same. The way station smelled like oil and ozone and 100 different species living too close together. Taiyang walked through the corridors with his hood up, trying to draw less attention. It did not work. Everyone stared. Some whispered. Others pointed openly. A few moved away quickly, fear clear on their alien faces. The reaction told him everything about how the galaxy viewed his kind. Mirai stayed close, her hand near her weapon. She led him through the maze of passages, moving with purpose. She knew this place. The station master owed her a favor from years ago. She hoped that favor was still worth something. She hoped it would be enough to buy them time and supplies. She hoped they were not walking into a trap. They reached a secure meeting room in the lower levels. Mirai knocked using a specific pattern. The door opened to reveal a Kronar merchant, his forearms folded in a gesture of either greeting or caution. His large eyes studied them both before settling on Taiyang. The merchant said one word in heavily accented trade language. Impossible. Mirai said that word was getting old. The merchant stepped aside and let them enter. Inside the room, they found 2 other beings waiting. One was a Thessian pilot, her silver skin marked with old scars. The other was someone Taiyang had never expected to see again. A human, a woman with short black hair and tired eyes. She wore the remains of a mining colony uniform. She stared at Taiyang like he was a ghost. Then she started crying. Her name was Yuna. She had been stranded like Taiyang, caught too far from the evacuation gates when they closed. For 3 years, she had hidden on the edges of civilized space, working illegal jobs, staying invisible. She had thought she was alone. Finding another human alive felt like a miracle. They embraced, Two members of a supposedly extinct species finding unexpected comfort in shared survival. The Kronar merchant explained that the message had brought them together. A coded transmission sent using old human encryption. It had reached 17 different hiding places. 9 humans had responded. 9 survivors scattered across 3 sectors of space. They were coming to this way station, drawn by the hope of finding others like themselves. Taeyang felt something break inside him. He was not alone. Humanity was not gone. Over the next 2 days they arrived. Technicians and soldiers, scientists and farmers, people who had been stranded on distant stations or lost during the chaos. They had survived by hiding, by adapting, by refusing to give up. Each one told a similar story. Each one had thought they were the last. Finding others transformed them from individuals into a community again. With them came information. Jiwon connected to their data cores and storage devices, piecing together fragments of memory and corrupted files. The AI worked without rest, driven by something that looked like desperation. It wanted to remember. It needed to understand what had happened to humanity. And slowly, bit by bit, the truth emerged from the broken data. The evacuation had been planned, not in response to an attack, but as a strategic withdrawal. Humanity had discovered something about the wormhole network, something the Galactic Council desperately wanted to keep hidden. The gates were not ancient technology left by extinct civilizations. They were control mechanisms. The Council used them to restrict which species could travel where, maintaining their power through monopoly on movement. Humans had developed their own gate technology, independent of the network. They could create wormholes anywhere, breaking the Council's control. When humanity revealed this breakthrough, the Council panicked. They could not allow free travel. It would end their authority. So they demanded humanity surrender the technology. Humanity refused. War seemed inevitable. Instead of fighting, humanity chose to disappear. They evacuated through their own gates to hidden locations beyond mapped space. They took their technology and knowledge with them. The Council could not follow because they did not understand how the human gates worked. So they created a story about humanity being destroyed. They made humans into a warning. This is what happens when you defy us. But the evacuation had not been perfect. Thousands of humans were too far away to reach the gates in time. The gates could not stay open forever. Eventually, they were destroyed to prevent the Council from finding humanity's new homes. Those left behind were abandoned, not forgotten. Humanity had intended to return for them once they were strong enough. 300 years later, that return had never come. Taeyang listened to all of this with a mixture of relief and anger. Relief because humanity lived. Anger because they had been abandoned. He understood the logic. Saving billions meant sacrificing thousands. But understanding did not make it easier. He and the others were the acceptable losses in a grander plan. They were the ones left to die so that humanity could survive. Yuna placed a hand on his shoulder. She said surviving was their victory. They had refused to die. That meant something. Taeyang nodded slowly. She was right. They had endured. That made them more than abandoned refugees. That made them survivors of the highest order. And now they had to decide what came next. The group gathered in the meeting room. 9 humans and their alien allies. Mirai had proven herself by helping Taeyang escape. The Kronar merchant wanted to profit from the chaos that was coming. The Thessian pilot simply hated the Council for her own reasons. Together they formed an unlikely alliance. The question was what to do with it. Yuna said they should find where humanity went. Jiwon had recovered coordinates from the evacuation files. They could search for the hidden colonies. Taeyang agreed but added another option. They could expose the truth. The Council had lied to trillions of beings for 3 centuries. That lie could be used against them. Truth was a weapon if wielded properly. Before they could decide, the station alarms began wailing. Mirai checked her communicator and cursed. A Velthrian battle group had arrived in the system. They were demanding the station turn over any humans present. The station master was refusing, citing neutrality laws. But the Velthrians were not asking. They were preparing to board by force. The group had minutes before soldiers filled the corridors. Taeyang made a decision. He said they needed to split up. Some would take the ships and run, leading the search away. Others would stay and hide, using the confusion to gather more information. And one person needed to transmit the truth to every communication network they could reach. It was time the galaxy learned what had really happened to humanity. Mireille volunteered to be the decoy. She said her scout ship was fast and her name was already on their lists. Drawing them away was a role she understood. The Thessian pilot agreed to go with her, adding firepower to speed. Yuna and 3 others would take a cargo ship and head for the coordinates Ji-won had found. They would search for the hidden human colonies. That left Taeyang and 4 others to stay behind. They would infiltrate the station's communication hub and broadcast the truth before escaping. It was the most dangerous task, but also the most important. Ji-won had compiled all the evidence into a single file. Encrypted communications, evacuation logs, council meeting records. Everything needed to prove the conspiracy. All they had to do was transmit it. The group moved quickly, each going to their assigned ships or positions. Taeyang watched Mireille leave and felt a strange emotion. She was an alien, a member of the species that had hunted him. But she had become something like a friend, maybe more than a friend. He hoped she would survive. He hoped they all would. But hope was a luxury when you were fighting the most powerful force in the galaxy. The Velthrian soldiers breached the station's outer docks. Mireille launched at the same moment, her ship screaming past them at dangerous speeds. They took the bait, 3 corvettes breaking formation to pursue. The Thessian pilot followed, engaging the remaining ships with precision weapons fire. Explosions lit up the asteroid field as the battle began. Inside the station, Taeyang and his team moved through maintenance tunnels toward the communication hub. They encountered station security twice. Both times the guards let them pass. The station master had apparently decided that the enemy of his enemy was worth protecting. Or maybe he just hated the Velthrians enough to risk everything. Either way, it bought them time. They reached the hub and began slicing into the systems. Ji-won guided them through security protocols, its knowledge of ancient network architecture proving invaluable. Outside, the sounds of fighting grew closer. The Velthrians were pushing deeper into the station. Taeyang worked faster, his fingers flying across alien interfaces. They needed 5 minutes. They had 3. The door exploded inward. Velthrian soldiers poured through, weapons ready. Taeyang hit the final command. The transmission began, spreading across every communication channel in this sector. The truth about humanity, broadcast to millions of receivers. It could not be stopped now. It could not be erased. The galaxy would finally know what had been hidden from them. The lead soldier raised her weapon. Taeyang recognized her. Captain Dabin, the one who had pursued Mireille to Kiro 7. Her face showed no emotion as she aimed at his chest. Taeyang stood straight, refusing to die on his knees. If this was the end, he would meet it standing. He had exposed the truth. He had given humanity a chance. That was enough, but Dabin did not fire. She lowered her weapon slightly and spoke. She said the transmission was already spreading. She said questions were being asked in every system. She said the council captain Dabin did not wait for an answer. She ordered her soldiers to stand down and gestured for Taeyang's team to follow her. The soldiers looked confused but obeyed. Discipline ran deep in the Velthrian military. They moved through the station quickly, heading toward the secure docks where military ships waited. Behind them, the station descended into chaos as residents fought against the remaining Velthrian forces. Taeyang did not trust Dabin. He could not afford to. But he also recognized that she had just saved their lives. That meant something, even if he did not understand her motives yet. He followed, watching her carefully for any sign of betrayal. Around them, the station shook with explosions. Somewhere above, Mireille and the Thessian pilot were still fighting. He hoped they were winning. They reached a military transport, sleek and well-armed. Dabin's soldiers ushered them aboard with efficiency that suggested this had been planned. Once everyone was inside, Dabin sealed the hatches and took the pilot's seat herself. The ship launched immediately, shooting away from the station into the asteroid field. No one pursued. Taeyang realized that Dabin's own forces were letting them escape. When they were clear of immediate danger, Dabin activated the autopilot and turned to face them. She removed her helmet, revealing a face marked with old scars. Her eyes were yellow and sharp, typical of her species, but they held something unexpected. Weariness, maybe even regret. She said she owed them an explanation. Taeyang said that was an understatement. Dabin explained that not everyone in the Velthrian military supported the Council's policies. A growing faction believed that the lies about humanity were wrong. They had no proof until now. The transmission Taeyang had sent provided that proof. Encrypted council communications, evacuation logs, everything needed to expose the conspiracy. Her faction wanted to use that evidence to force change, but change would not come easily. The council had maintained power for centuries through control of information. They would fight to preserve their authority. Already they were claiming the transmission was fake, manufactured by terrorists and criminals. Many would believe them. Trust in authority ran deep among the law-abiding species. Breaking that trust required more than evidence. It required witnesses. Taeyang understood what she was asking. She wanted him and the other humans to testify, to stand before the galaxy and prove they existed, to tell their stories and make the lie impossible to maintain. It was dangerous. It would make them targets for every faction with something to lose. But it was also their best chance to change things. He looked at the other humans aboard the ship. They all nodded. They would do it. Dabin said they needed more than just testimony. They needed a demonstration of what humanity could offer the galaxy. The council had painted humans as dangerous and aggressive. They needed to show something different. Cooperation, innovation, the ability to solve problems that other species could not. Taeyang asked what she had in mind. Dabin smiled grimly. She said she had the perfect problem. The Veltrian Empire was fracturing. Not just politically, but physically. A critical relay station in the Chronos system was failing. It controlled wormhole traffic for 3 sectors. If it went offline, millions would be stranded. The council had been trying to repair it for months without success. The technology was old, from species that no longer existed. Nobody understood how it worked anymore. Nobody except possibly humans who had made a specialty of reverse engineering ancient technology. Taeyang saw the trap immediately. If they succeeded, they proved humans were valuable. If they failed, they proved humans were useless. Either way, they would be exposed and vulnerable. But he also saw the opportunity. Getting access to that relay station meant getting access to the wormhole network's core systems. With Jiwon's help, they could learn how the network really worked. They could find proof of how the council had manipulated travel to maintain control. He agreed to try. Dabin looked relieved. She said they would need to move fast. The council's forces were already hunting for the humans who had broadcast the transmission. Every hour they delayed gave the council more time to prepare countermeasures. The relay station was 3 days away at maximum speed. They needed to plan their approach carefully. One mistake would mean capture or death. Over the next 3 days they planned and prepared. Taeyang studied everything Dabin had about the relay station. The technology was indeed ancient, built by the architects themselves according to legend. But Taeyang saw patterns in the designs. The architects had been biological beings once before they became machine intelligence. Their technology reflected organic thinking processes. Humans could understand that. Humans had evolved to see patterns in chaos. Jiwon worked with the other human technicians analyzing the data. The AI had fragments of memories about human research into wormhole technology. That research had been based on studying architect relics. There were similarities between what humanity had developed and what the architects had built. Not copies, but parallel evolution of ideas. Both humans and architects had seen the same solutions to the same problems. That gave them an advantage. On the second day of travel, they received news. Mireille had survived the battle at the way station. She and the Thessian pilot had destroyed 2 corvettes and damaged a 3rd before escaping. They were now heading toward the coordinates Yuna's group had taken. If the hidden human colonies existed, they would find them. Taeyang felt relief wash through him. Mireille was alive. That mattered more than he expected. They also learned that the transmission was causing exactly the chaos they had hoped for. Protests had broken out on a dozen worlds. Independent journalists were investigating the claims. Some council members were demanding answers. The carefully constructed lie was crumbling. Not quickly, but steadily. Truth had momentum now. The question was whether they could survive long enough to see it reach critical mass. The Chronos system appeared ahead of them on the 3rd day. The relay station hung in space like a massive mechanical flower. Its ancient surfaces covered in symbols nobody could read anymore. Ships surrounded it, both military and civilian. Everyone wanted to witness what would happen. The galaxy was watching. Success would prove humans were valuable allies. Failure would prove they were dangerous frauds who deserved extinction. Dabin's ship approached the station slowly, transponder codes identifying them as authorized. They docked without incident. Taeyang and his team suited up and prepared to board. Standard atmosphere on the station was toxic to humans. They would work in sealed suits connected to G1 through portable terminals. Communication would be difficult but possible. The real challenge would be understanding technology built by beings who thought in ways no living species could fully comprehend. They entered the station and immediately felt its age. The corridors were too large, designed for beings much bigger than any current species. The walls pulsed with faint light, organic technology that blurred the line between machine and living tissue. Everything felt alien in a way that went beyond simple cultural differences. This was technology from a species that had transcended biological existence. It was beautiful and terrifying. The station's control core was a chamber filled with floating crystals, each one containing processing power beyond anything modern science could create. The crystals were failing, their light dimming as ancient power sources depleted. Felthrian technicians had tried replacing components, but nothing worked. The station was rejecting their attempts. It was like the technology itself was dying. Taeyang studied the system for hours. He did not try to fix anything immediately. He just watched, looking for patterns. The other humans did the same, each bringing their own expertise. Engineers, programmers, theoretical physicists. Together, they represented humanity's greatest strength, diverse thinking. They saw the problem from multiple angles simultaneously. Finally, Taeyang saw it. The station was not dying. It was protecting itself. The architects had built-in fail-safes to prevent unauthorized modification. The Velthrian attempts to repair it had triggered those fail-safes. The station thought it was being attacked. Every repair attempt made things worse. They needed to convince the station they were not enemies. They needed to speak its language. G1 had the key. Hidden in the AI's damaged memories were fragments of the research humanity had done on architect technology. Not enough to understand everything, but enough to recognize the basic communication protocols. The architects had built their technology to respond to specific mathematical patterns, harmony ratios, fractal sequences, quantum resonances. It was less like programming and more like music. Taeyang began inputting commands, not through traditional interfaces, but through harmonic frequencies broadcast into the control crystals. It felt insane. He was essentially trying to sing to a machine. But the station responded. The light in the crystals shifted, pulsing in rhythm with his inputs. It was listening. More importantly, it was understanding. The repair took 12 hours. Taeyang and his team worked without rest, coaxing the ancient technology back to health. They did not replace components. They convinced the station to repair itself, guiding it through processes it had forgotten. The architects had built their technology to be semi-autonomous. It could heal. Give the Council's flagship arrived at the Kronos system with an escort of 20 warships. They surrounded the relay station, blocking every escape route. Taeyang watched from the control room as the massive vessels took position. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a planet. Together, they could turn the station into dust. But they would not. The station was too valuable. Instead, they would board and take what they wanted by force. Dabin received the transmission from the flagship. A council member appeared on screen, his features hidden behind ceremonial robes. He spoke with the authority of someone who had never been refused. He said the humans would surrender immediately. They would be placed in protective custody for their own safety. Resistance would be met with necessary force. The message was clear: submit or die. Taeyang looked at Dabin. She looked back. Neither spoke, but understanding passed between them. They had not come this far to surrender now. Dabin cut the transmission and activated her own forces. The ships loyal to her faction, hidden among the civilian vessels watching the station, powered up their weapons. It was not enough firepower to win a battle. It was barely enough to fight one. But it was all they had. The council member sent another message. He seemed genuinely surprised by the resistance. He said this was treason. He said the penalty for treason was death. He said Dabin had one final chance to surrender. She responded by targeting the flagship with every weapon the station possessed. Ancient defense systems, dormant for centuries, activated at her command. Taeyang had repaired more than just the wormhole gates. He had repaired everything. The battle began with light that could blind anyone watching without protection. Energy weapons, missiles, and mass drivers filled the space around the station. The Council's forces had superior numbers and firepower, but the station itself was a weapon beyond anything modern fleets could match. Architect technology tore through shields designed to stop conventional weapons. Ships exploded or simply vanished, reduced to atoms by weapons that manipulated reality itself. Inside the station, Taiyang worked frantically at the controls. He was not a soldier. He was an engineer. But engineering was how humans fought when they could not match raw strength. He redirected power, reinforced shields, and targeted the biggest threats with ruthless efficiency. Jiwan assisted, its processing speed allowing them to react faster than any biological crew. Together, they turned the station into a nightmare for the attacking fleet. But it was not enough. The Council kept sending more ships. For every vessel destroyed, 2 more appeared. They were willing to sacrifice their forces to end this rebellion. Taeyang realized they could not win through combat. They needed a different approach. They needed to make the Council fear what would happen if they continued fighting. They needed to threaten something the Council could not afford to lose. He accessed the station's wormhole controls. Jiwan had unlocked the deepest systems during the repairs. They could not just operate the gates now. They could modify them. They could change where they led. And most importantly, they could expose the modifications the Council had made centuries ago. Every restriction, every manipulation, every lie built into the network, all of it could be revealed and reversed. Taeyang sent a message to the Council flagship. He said they had control of the wormhole network. He said they could release all the restrictions the Council had placed. Free travel for everyone, just like the architects intended. The Council would lose their primary tool of control. Or the Council could accept a negotiation, stop the attack, agree to reforms, and let the humans live. The choice was theirs. The Council member appeared on screen again. His composure had cracked. Fear showed clearly on his alien features. He said releasing the restrictions would cause chaos. Species would travel freely, unregulated. Old conflicts would reignite. Pirates would have access to core systems. The galaxy would descend into anarchy. Taeyang said perhaps that was better than tyranny. Perhaps species deserved the freedom to make their own mistakes. The Council member tried to negotiate. He offered concessions, recognition of humanity's survival, compensation for the stranded humans, even a seat on the Council itself. Anything except releasing the network restrictions. Taeyang listened and realized something important. The Council was not evil. They were frightened. They believed their control prevented worse things. They had convinced themselves that their lies were necessary. They had become prisoners of their own propaganda, but fear did not excuse their actions. Good intentions did not justify centuries of manipulation. Taeyang said they would release some restrictions immediately as proof of their capability. Travel between previously locked systems would become possible. The Council would see what free movement looked like. If chaos resulted, they could discuss restoring some controls. If peace resulted, the Council would accept permanent reforms. Take the deal or lose everything. Before the Council could respond, new ships arrived in the system. Not Council forces. These were civilian vessels, thousands of them, coming from every direction. Ships belonging to species that had heard the transmission about humanity, species that had learned about the lies. They came to witness history to see if the rumors were true. And they came armed with cameras and transmitters, ready to broadcast everything across the galaxy. The Council could not attack now. Not with millions watching. Any violence would be recorded and shared. The Council had lost control of the narrative completely. Public opinion had shifted. Independent journalists were demanding answers. Protests were becoming riots on some worlds. The carefully maintained order was collapsing. The Council had to choose between peaceful reform and violent suppression that would doom them either way. Dabin received a private transmission from within the Council chambers. One of the members, speaking anonymously, said that internal debate was fierce. Hardliners wanted to destroy the station regardless of consequences. Moderates wanted negotiation. Reformers wanted to use this crisis to implement changes they had been advocating for decades. The Council was fracturing just like everything else. The question was which faction would win. Taeyang made the decision for them. He executed the first system unlock. 10 previously restricted wormhole routes opened simultaneously. Ships that had been denied access suddenly found gates responding to their requests. Species that had been trapped in their designated zones could move freely. The restrictions were real and they could be removed. The proof was undeniable. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the predicted chaos. It did not come. Ships moved through the newly opened routes peacefully. Some traveled to see relatives they had been separated from for decades. Others pursued trade opportunities that restrictions had prevented. A few went exploring, curious about systems they had only heard about. But nobody started wars. Nobody descended into anarchy. The Council's fears proved unfounded. The Council member appeared on screen one final time. He looked defeated, exhausted by the weight of centuries of lies finally being exposed. He said the Council accepted the proposal. They would implement reforms. Free travel would be restored gradually, with monitoring to ensure stability. Humans would be recognized as survivors, not extinct. And investigations would begin into who had ordered the original cover-up and why. It was not a complete victory. Some counselors would escape justice. Some restrictions would remain in place longer than they should. But it was progress. Real measurable progress toward a better galaxy. And it had started with one human refusing to accept extinction, and one alien choosing to believe him despite everything she had been taught. The Council fleet withdrew. Dabin's forces stood down. The civilian ships remained, turning the space around the station into an impromptu gathering. Beings from dozens of species wanted to meet the humans who had changed everything. Taeyang found it overwhelming. For 3 years he had been alone. Now he was at the center of galactic attention. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. News arrived from the coordinates Yuna had traveled to. They had found it. The hidden human colonies. Billions of humans living in artificial habitats beyond mapped space. They had built a thriving civilization in exile, always planning to return but never strong enough to risk it. Until now, with the Council accepting reforms, the path home was finally open. Humanity could return to known space without fear of extinction. But returning came with complications. 300 years of separation had created cultural differences. The humans in hiding had developed their own society, their own values. They would not simply slot back into the old order. They would bring new ideas, new technologies, new challenges. The galaxy was about to become much more complicated. Some would welcome this change. Others would resist it. The struggle was far from over. Another transmission arrived. This one was personal. Mirai's voice came through, tired but alive. She said she was at the coordinates with Yuna and the others. She said they had met the hidden colonies. She said humanity was everything she had hoped and more. Creative, resilient, optimistic despite their long exile. She said she was staying to help coordinate the return. She asked if Taeyang was planning to join them. Taeyang looked at the relay station around him. He looked at Dabin 1 year later. Taeyang stood on the observation deck of the relay station and watched Earth appear in the viewport. It looked exactly as he remembered. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in familiar patterns. 300 years of abandonment had allowed the planet to heal from industrial damage. The air was clean again. The forest had regrown. Earth was ready to welcome its children home. The return had taken months of negotiation and planning. Humanity's hidden colonies, numbered in the billions, spread across dozens of habitats. They could not all come back at once. The infrastructure did not exist. More importantly, not all of them wanted to return. A generation born in exile had no memories of Earth. To them, the habitats were home. Some chose to stay, building new lives in the places where they had always lived. But millions did want to return. They came in waves carefully coordinated to avoid overwhelming the planet's capacity. The first wave consisted of engineers and scientists, people who would rebuild the infrastructure humanity needed. The second wave brought farmers and teachers, people who would make Earth livable again. The third wave was everyone else, ordinary people seeking connection to their ancestral home. Taeyang had worked tirelessly to make this possible. The relay station became the hub for coordinating the return. He modified the wormhole gates to handle the increased traffic safely. He trained others to maintain the systems. He solved 1,000 small problems that threatened to derail the entire project. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply satisfying. He was helping humanity come home. The Galactic Council had kept most of their promises. Reforms moved slowly, hindered by bureaucracy and resistance from conservatives. But they moved. Travel restrictions continued to ease. Independent oversight committees investigated corruption. Some former council members faced justice for their crimes. Not all, but enough to send a message. The old order was ending. What came next remained uncertain, but it would be built on truth rather than lies. Captain Dabin had become a hero to the reform movement and a traitor to traditionalists. Her military career ended the day she chose to help humans instead of arrest them. But she gained something more valuable. She became the first official liaison between humanity and the Velthrian Empire's new government. The position let her shape policy and build bridges. She said it was the best thing she had ever done, worth every sacrifice. G1 had proven that artificial intelligence could be trusted. The AI continued helping Taeyang, but also began teaching others. Universities invited G1 to lecture on ancient technology. Governments consulted the AI about infrastructure planning. Slowly, laws against AI research relaxed. G1 became proof that intelligence, artificial or biological, could coexist peacefully. The AI seemed happy with this role, as much as any machine could express happiness. Yuna and the other stranded humans had all found their places. Some stayed with the hidden colonies, helping them integrate with galactic society. Others returned to Earth and began rebuilding. A few, like Taeyang, chose to remain at the frontier, working where different species met and mixed. Each found their own way to contribute to humanity's second chance. None of them were alone anymore. That mattered more than anything. Mirai arrived at the relay station 3 days before the first large-scale Earth landing. She came aboard Taeyang's ship unannounced, walking into the control room like she had never left. Taeyang looked up from his work and felt something warm bloom in his chest. They had spoken regularly over the past year, but seeing her in person was different. Better. She smiled at him, showing those sharp teeth that no longer looked threatening. She said it was time he took a break. They walked through the station together, talking about everything that had happened. Mirai described the hidden colonies, their architecture and culture, and the brilliant ways they had adapted to exile. Taeyang told her about the challenges of managing wormhole traffic and dealing with bureaucrats who still distrusted humans. They laughed about the absurdity of their first meeting, trapped together by a plasma storm while the galaxy thought one of them should not exist. Mirai asked him if he planned to stay at the station forever. Taeyang said he did not know. The work was important, but he could train others to continue it. Earth needed people with his skills too. The hidden colonies needed bridges built between them and the rest of humanity. There were so many places he could be useful. The question was where he wanted to be, not where he was needed. She said that was progress. A year ago, he had been focused only on survival. Now he was thinking about choices and desires. That was what happened when you stopped just enduring and started living. Taeyang realized she was right. He had spent 3 years in survival mode, then another year in crisis mode. Maybe it was time to consider what he actually wanted from life instead of just reacting to circumstances. What he wanted, he discovered, was standing next to him. Mirai had become more than an ally or friend. She understood him in ways no one else could. She had seen him at his lowest and believed in him anyway. She had risked everything to help him when logic said she should have turned him in. Whatever existed between them had grown beyond simple friendship into something deeper and more complex. He told her this, stumbling over words because emotion was harder than engineering. Mirai listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said she felt the same. It was complicated. They were different species with different needs and different futures, but they had built something real together. They had changed the galaxy together. Maybe that was enough foundation to build whatever came next. The first Earth landing happened on a clear morning. Thousands of ships descended through the atmosphere, carrying humans who had never seen their home world. Taeyang and Mirai watched from orbit, seeing the ships spread out across continents. Settlements appeared overnight, temporary structures that would become permanent communities. Humanity was planting roots again, connecting with soil they had been separated from for 3 centuries. Messages flooded in from all over the galaxy. Congratulations, warnings, offers of assistance, demands for restrictions. The return was controversial. Some species welcomed humanity back. Others feared what humans might do with their freedom. The debate would continue for years, probably decades. But the important thing was that humanity had a voice in that debate now. They were participants, not subjects. Taeyang received a specific invitation. The New Earth government wanted him to come down and be recognized for his contributions. They wanted to give him honors, make speeches, celebrate him as a hero. He found the idea exhausting. He was not a hero. He was an engineer who had refused to accept death. Everything else had followed from that simple stubbornness. But Mirai convinced him to accept. She said people needed symbols. They needed stories of individuals overcoming impossible odds. His story gave hope to everyone who felt powerless against larger forces. He did not have to enjoy the attention, but he should accept it gracefully. Besides, she wanted to see Earth herself. She had spent so much time learning about humanity. Seeing their homeworld would complete her education. They descended together in a small shuttle, just the two of them and Jiwon's portable core. The landing site was a restored park near what had once been Seoul. Trees grew thick around ancient buildings that humanity had preserved through their absence. A crowd waited. Thousands of humans and dozens of aliens who had come to witness this moment. Cameras recorded everything, broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. Taeyang stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time in 3 years. The gravity felt right in a way orbital stations never did. The air smelled of growing things and rain. He knelt and touched the ground, feeling grass beneath his fingers. This was home, not just the planet but the concept of home itself. The place where you belonged, where your presence made sense, where you could finally rest from running. The ceremony was shorter than expected. Someone gave a speech, someone else presented him with a medal. He said a few words about persistence and cooperation between species. Then it was over, and he could escape into the crowd where he felt more comfortable. Mirai stayed close, fascinated by everything she saw. She said Earth was beautiful. He agreed, seeing it through her eyes and remembering why his species had fought so hard to survive. They walked to his old shelter location on Kiros 7, preserved now as a historical site. Someone had restored it, fixing all the makeshift repairs he had cobbled together during 3 years of isolation. It looked better than it ever had when he lived there, cleaner and more organized. But it had also lost something. The desperate creativity, the proof that humans could make anything work if they had to. Mirai said this was where it started. A storm, a desperate refugee, and an impossible meeting. If she had landed anywhere else, if the storm had been weaker, if she had decided to kill him instead of talk to him, everything would be different. The galaxy would still believe humanity was extinct. The Council would still control travel. Truth would still be buried under centuries of lies. One moment, one choice had changed everything. Taeyang said he used to think survival was just about enduring. Getting through one more day, solving one more problem, holding on until something changed. But he had learned that survival was more than that.